So again, thank you for joining us this evening. I apologize for the technical problems. So Mayor Pauly's asked that we hold this community budget meeting this evening to get some feedback from the community on issues that we're facing as we move forward with the fiscal year 2022 budget. The mayor will be presenting her draft budget to the community at the end of September. What I'm going to share with you this evening is some slides that we gave to the council the other evening with estimated revenue forecasts for 2022. Next slide. So as we begin preparation of the 2022 budget, we're going to look a little bit at, again, the revenue forecast for our general fund. And the general fund is a fund that provides revenue for most of the general services that we have, police, fire, parks, street maintenance, things like that. Our outlook for 2021, and then the forecast moving forward for 22. We'll also talk about one specific general fund, one specific revenue not affiliated with the general fund, and that's the real estate excise tax, or known by its acronym REIT. Next slide. This is Beth Goldberg, our finance director, who unfortunately is leaving us at the end of the week to go to the city of Kirkland. But she loves these quotes, and the economic gauges are going nuts, really, as we are looking at the budget coming through the pandemic. I don't think I could say out of the pandemic anymore, but coming through the pandemic, things continue to be a little haywire economically all over, and certainly here with the city of Issaquah's budget. Next slide. We are looking at a generally improved revenue forecast. And we estimate going into the 2022 budget that we'll have a $1.3 million of additional revenue to put toward ongoing costs, and as much as $8.5 million in one-time costs, one-time revenue available for one-time costs. In addition, the city has received a little over $11 million from the American Recovery Act funds from federal government. Most of those dollars have not yet been budgeted, and we have about $4 million in affordable housing revenues, which we'll also talk about a little bit more as we move forward. Next slide. So focusing on the general fund, as this slide shows, basically what the budget process is we look at what we've spent last year, we remove one-time costs, we update existing salary, benefit, and contract costs. We then look at revenue forecasts, and we then determine based on current year spending, are we in a surplus or a deficit? And then we also look at additional resources if we're in a surplus, or reductions we would need to make up with the deficit. And as we are looking at the preparations for the 22 budget, we look at we're in a surplus mode. Next slide. For the general fund forecast overview, this slide looks at the adopted budget, our forecast from the spring, our forecast currently, and then the monies that we're looking to budget for 22. Again, all being very positive with the additional revenue forecast for 21. That increases our fund balance. Fund balance is in essence money left in our accounts after we pay all of our expenses. And so as you can see here, the adopted budget had us ending the current year with a $10.3 million fund balance, and we're looking at almost 19.8. So that because of a good 20 that ended, a budget year 20 that ended strong, and then our anticipations for 21. Next slide. So as we look specifically at the main revenue sources for the general fund, property tax, it's usually a pretty fixed amount that we expect each year. And so we're looking at some small increases there. Sales tax is really the significant general fund revenue that is growing at unprecedented levels in fiscal 21. And so we are at a budgeted $15.8 million in sales tax. We believe that that'll be nearly $4 million more as the August forecast, and then we are looking at a budgeted number for next year at about $20.4 million. We'll talk a little bit more about sales tax in a minute. The business and occupations tax, monies that are paid by Issaquah-based businesses, also doing very well. Utility tax, the taxes we charge on water, sewer, natural gas, that is remaining pretty constant. And then another revenue bucket also performing a little bit better than we expected. So again, when we look at those main revenue sources, we're doing generally positive. Property tax, don't want to spend a lot of time on this. Things are pretty much on track. The city has the ability under Washington state law to levy a 1% increase, and so we are planning to propose to the city council to do that with the 22 budget. Next slide. Sales tax, again, going very well. We are on track to exceed our budget by nearly 25%, and that, again, is unprecedented numbers for sales tax. Next slide. As you can see in this chart, back to 2006, generally cyclical. The things were generally stronger in 18, a little bit of a hit in 19, remained very strong in 20 despite the pandemic, but looking at really numbers that we've not seen in 15 years, estimated for 21 and then moving forward to 22. Next slide. Sales tax by sector, again, where the sales tax is coming from is also important. Construction and retail trade generally drive sales tax strength, and as you can see on this, that we're seeing an increase of 27% on the retail side. Construction up 78%. Construction, of course, is cyclical. It depends on the projects that are occurring here. So far this year, the biggest construction project in the city is the Costco headquarters. And so that project remains under construction, so there's additional purchases occurring there. Accommodations and food service portion of the sales tax, and then all others except affordable housing. There are some increment tax there, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So again, sales tax very strong. One of the challenges I think we have for 22 is to decide how much of this is one time for construction, how much of this is one time on the retail side, because of people's purchasing patterns changing. And so that's something we need to consider as we move forward. Next slide. Business and occupations tax also doing well. Number of reasons for that. One was a delayed payment for 20, so some of that we're seeing in 21, but otherwise, I think indications that businesses are recovering here in Issaquah, so that's good news. Next slide. We can keep going. Utility tax, again, that is remaining relatively flat, so that's good news. Utility tax is usually impacted by increases in the use of the utilities, and that's unusual certainly here in Issaquah to see. So this is you want this tax to revenue projections to be relatively on target, and that's what we're seeing. Next slide. Some trend information. The telephone, I think, is always interesting to look at as people's use of landline telephones decrease. So have the tax revenue that we've seen. Cable TV has been trending down for some period of time, and that continues to trend down. Next slide. Other revenues, we have fees and charges in other parts of the organization are. I think here, again, we're looking at some recovery in our parks and community services. Police remains rather flat, and so that's not as significant as it might otherwise be. There's a couple of one-time revenues that aren't included here. The city's purchase of the Bergsma property, we're expecting to receive in this current fiscal year $1.9 million from the state of Washington in a grant to help repay some of those costs, so that's not included here. Nor is some preliminary allocation of the American Recovery Act funds by the council for the adopted capital improvement plan. Next slide. I think we've talked about that. Next slide. Dedicated affordable housing revenues. The city receives two pieces of sales tax related to affordable housing. One is a pass-through of the state's portion of sales tax. It's a relatively small increment. We anticipate about $120,000 this year, $150,000 next year. The second piece is a tax that King County has adopted for all of the communities, and as well as the unincorporated area of King County. But individual cities were also able to adopt that tax and retain those tax dollars. It's 1/10 of 1%. And so the Issaquah City Council, along with about half a dozen other communities in the county, chose to enact that tax on our own to retain that money. And so that's coming in. We forecasted about $1.8 million, about the same forecast for next year. And that's money that can be used on only very specific purposes, either for affordable housing or supportive services that support affordable housing. The City Council is continuing to discuss how best to use that money with King County. And so that is also part of the mix moving forward with the 22 budget. Next slide. We're looking again at some changes in the current year that we don't anticipate being very significant. And then looking at 22, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we look to see if we are going to be balanced, basically covering the base budget for the current year. So there are adjustments there, and then additional expenditures that the mayor will be proposing those as part of her budget in September, and they'll be considered by the City Council. Next slide. Fund balance outlook, as I think we've talked at the top, continues to grow. Mayor Pauly has committed to the City Council that we would have a budget presented that would allocate that fund balance so that we are in line with the City Council's adopted fund balance policy, which is to have a fund balance that does not exceed 20%, and so of the operating budget. And so we will have a certain amount of one-time dollars recommended in the budget next year for spend down that fund balance. Next slide. Again, this I think just is a recap of what we've talked about. Next slide. Real estate excise tax charge on real estate transactions, which is not in the general fund, but a significant revenue source for us. Next slide. This shows an increase in collections through June, but a decrease in transactions. So what that means is less transactions that are worth more money. And that's, I don't think, any surprise to anyone here living in Issaquah that property values continue to increase. So even though we've seen a reduction from 2018 and 2019, the revenue that's being collected because of the value of the sales is increasing. Next slide. Forecasting what we'll do, we try to back out large, usually commercial purchases from what we would consider routine transactions from a budgeting perspective. That is usually a game of roulette. We try to keep our ear to the ground with the pending transactions. Unfortunately, most of the time, large commercial transactions we read about in the newspaper. So that is something that we try to marry as close as we can, budget to actual. Next slide. The REACH forecast, we're looking for REACH to go up about $400,000 for 22. Again, reflecting the increased real estate values. You know, we are not recommending that the council drastically change its spending with REACH because it is so volatile. Hopefully a year from now, we'll have a better sense of where the real estate market in this is going. But at this point, it remains pretty volatile. Next slide. So looking ahead for this process, next slide. Mayor Pauly will present to the City Council at the end of September her proposed 22 budget. Again, looking at the ongoing general fund revenues, one-time general fund revenues. We continue to talk about the American Recovery Act dollars, and so some portions of that will be included in the budget. We have until 2024 to spend that money, so there is, on one hand, no great urgency to do that, but you know, we will certainly address some of that in the budget. We continue to look at opportunities to leverage additional revenues, and again, the Issaquah strategic plan certainly guides the recommendation, especially on our one-time spending. Next slide. So the budget schedule, the city staff is busy working on the budget. Appreciate the two of you who have signed up this evening to join us. So want to get your comments and feedback. This is the one opportunity we have talking to the community about the budget prior to the budget's transmittal by Mayor Pauly on September 20th. The council has a series of budget deliberations scheduled September through November, and then a scheduled budget adoption on November 15th. Next slide. Great. With that, I apologize again for some tech problems on my end. I will continue to work on them as we move forward. I'm going to ask Autumn, or either ask the folks that are on the call if you'd like to type your question into the chat. You're welcome to do that. Otherwise, Autumn will do her best to paraphrase that. Autumn, I don't know if there's an easy access telephone number for the meeting that you can send me, and I can just call in to the meeting. We use WebEx only for community meetings. We use Microsoft Teams for others, and that I know where to find the number, but I don't know where to find the number for the WebEx meeting. So again, happy to open it up to any questions.
I suppose this is just a comment for now, but I guess can also lead into a question. Besides the transportation stuff that I'm advocating for on the advisory board, another issue that I'm kind of interested in is making our city more participatory in terms of, there's only 2 people here, or 3 people, and there's simply not enough participation.
The audio.
Yeah.
What's the meeting number, Autumn?
I didn't realize now I was on mute. Sorry about that. I was getting Wally the access code. Thank you for those comments around engagement. And that is one area that we continue to work on as far as how to engage folks, especially during important budget season. So I would love any community members' help in rallying up those that you know to participate, especially as Mayor Pauly proposes her budget this fall. That is a great time to provide feedback, and we will have several public hearings and another public community meeting once the budget is presented, so that when you see what's proposed, you can provide input on it as well. But would love to hear any of your, like you said, you're advocating for transportation, but any priorities too as we start to shape what Mayor Pauly's proposed budget will be. Were you able to join us, Wally? Oh, you're on mute. One sec. Wally, yes, we got you. Thank you.
My apologies. Question.
Yeah, so Wally, Jillian was just describing, along with advocacy that you're working on as far as transportation with the advisory board, how can we increase participation in the community on important decisions like the budget? So we were talking about that it's an ongoing thing. It's, we've got 3 people here tonight, and despite a lot of outreach and engagement and encouraging people to join us. We talked a bit about the fact there's more public hearings and another community meeting coming up later this fall that we hope to provide folks something to react to and to look at and to provide feedback on, but that's as far as we got.
Yeah, and it's a challenge in many communities, especially when there are not cuts on the table. When there are cuts on the table, that usually engages people more than when you say things are well financially. So that, having something like this, even for 3 people, is important because it gives folks an opportunity to chime in. So again, any suggestions are very, very welcome, but that's kind of our strategy.
You know, I've been fascinated by, you know, I was doing some research earlier this year actually about participatory budgets and their impact for public input. I think it's really meaningful when you have these programs because the public feels like that they can actually contribute their own ideas to the city's life, basically. So I think that's a good way to, I know it's too early to set up the apparatus this year, but I feel like some sort of feasibility study would be a really interesting thing to put on.
Well, and thank you for the suggestion. And have in previous lives been involved in participatory budget exercises. One of the great challenges with that is that you have to have enough resources on the table to make it meaningful. You know, my experience with when I was in the Chicago area, the city of Chicago had 50 wards. Each ward had $1 million. And so when you had $1 million, you know, there's lots of things you can do with $1 million. In Issaquah, we have 15 neighborhoods. If we were to allocate $100,000 to 15 neighborhoods, you know, that's a significant amount of money for Issaquah. You know, anything less than that, you know, it's very difficult to come up with meaningful projects for smaller amounts of money. So I think the council, I've talked to several council members who are interested in doing something like this. We've talked about, you know, perhaps having larger, you know, portions of the community, you know, take the 15 neighborhoods and divide it into 3 or 4 geographic areas and do something like that. But I appreciate the feedback, and you know, as we talk with the council, you know, that's something we may be able to do, if not this year, in future years.
So can I go next?
Yeah, hi,
Of course.
Lisa.
Okay, so I love the sound of on track and on track to exceed and one-time dollars. It makes my heart sing. So I do have a project that I would like to be considered for the 2022 budget. I would like a bathroom that a bathroom that's available to the community 24 hours a day, 365 days a year in downtown Issaquah. So I know
I'm sorry, did you say a bathroom? I'm sorry,
yes,
a bathroom?
A bathroom, yeah.
Oh,
sorry,
okay,
my funny
thank
accent. You. So we have lots of public restrooms and they're open right now because it's the summer. But come the fall, and I believe it's the end of October, the public restrooms pretty much all close and unavailable a lot of the, if at all during the day. They're definitely not open in the evening. And this has been an issue. I mean, it's been a particular issue during COVID when everything is closed. The libraries are closed and there is no public restroom available. It's particularly hard for our homeless population, and I do feel like we're setting them up to fail if we have no open restroom for them to use. They sleep in the park. If we don't want them to use the park as a restroom, then we have to have a bathroom for them. During COVID, I contacted Monica at the city, and she organised that the police would open the city hall bathroom for anybody that would want to use it out of hours. And although I wouldn't have a problem with that, a lot of the clients at the food bank where I work would have an issue with ringing the bell at the police station and asking to use the bathroom. So I would like a bathroom that's available 24 hours a day for the community to use. That's what I would like. I know there's some discussion about whether the Issaquah Community Hall could be there could be something done at Issaquah Community Hall to allow access to those restrooms. But that's what I would like maybe some of our one-time dollars spent on. I really feel quite passionately about having a restroom available for everybody, but especially our homeless population. You know, feces has been found around the community center area, and if we don't want that, then we have to have somewhere for people to use the restroom.
Great. Thank you.
That's my pitch. I think Bob may have mentioned it.
Yes, Councilmember DiMichele has mentioned it, and I think has shared with her colleagues that her plan is to advocate for that through the budget process. So, you know, we've done some preliminary thinking about location. You know, obviously there are construction costs involved. There are also ongoing maintenance costs, and so you know, either the fire station area with that community hall, our building here at the city hall, I think there's some plumbing we may be able to tap into. So I think that's absolutely something that's discussed. And as I share my notes from this meeting with the council, they'll certainly hear that. And we're going to, I think, post this meeting online as well. Perhaps we'll edit out the first 4 or 5 minutes of the city administrator fumbling for connection, but we'll leave everything else intact. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Ken?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Ken, not to put you on the spot, is there anything that you wanted to add or things that are on your mind as budget season starts?
Well, thanks for asking. I'm pleased that the income side of our budget is looking so healthy. I know that the city had to tighten the belt here earlier, and so that's great news. And you know, your comment about potentially having some neighborhood funds, you know, I think is quite interesting. I would encourage, you know, the city to pursue that, because I think the neighborhoods could help target some of that money, you know, in areas that might be of interest. Not the least, or maybe expanding some neighborhood parks. I guess the only thing else I would comment on, and it may not necessarily be a budget discussion, but maybe it is. You know, it seems like on and off, the city and some of the communities have talked about public-private partnerships. And you know, we in Tallis had sort of broached that topic with the city a year or two ago. We thought we actually had, you know, a pretty good project, and quite frankly, it really looked like the city wasn't interested in doing it. We got a price tag that was, you know, stratospheric. But you know, I really would like to see some emphasis on that, if possible. You know, where you know, when a community, a neighborhood, you know, would like something that's a city responsibility and could help pay for it, that we have a path to figure out how to do that. So that's all that's on my mind tonight.
Great. Thank you, Ken. You know, I think part of the council's discussion this year with the capital improvement plan was their frustration that there's not a portion of the process to, you know, vet new projects. I mean, a lot of what we have is sort of a list that seems to kind of be set, or the perception is that it's set. And how do new things get on that list? And I would think that those kind of public-private partnerships would be ones that, if they entered through that capital improvement planning process, perhaps might be easier. So I will share all this with the council and Mayor Pauly, and we'll see what we can do in the future. Other questions or comments?
I guess onto the parks portion of the budget, I would like to know, like, how the administration's preliminarily thinking about the stewardship program, Issaquah Volunteer Stewardship Program, and then also the general strategy you're thinking of approaching acquisition of the lands immediately surrounding Issaquah Creek, all the way to the Lake Sammamish State Park.
Mm-hmm. Two questions. Thanks for both. Regarding the, you know, using volunteers for stewardship, I mean, one of the greatest challenges has been the COVID-19 crisis and having the ability to get people together. The Green Issaquah program remains something that we have budget for. And quite honestly, we thought we were going to be able to do more this summer. We have not been able to. Looking at what the next even 3-4 months look like through the fall, I think are a big question mark at this point. But those resources remain in the budget. And if we're able to do more winter, spring, summer 22, we will do that. The other piece regarding land acquisition, there are dollars allocated for land acquisition. One of the challenges I think we face is how much, and how do we steer, what's the appropriate amount of dollars to put aside for land acquisition. As I mentioned, we'll be receiving $1.9 million back from the state of Washington in a grant that will reimburse us for a portion of the Bergsma purchase. The city council has not allocated those funds yet. I would not be surprised if there was a discussion to allocate those funds for land acquisition. So I think that's going to be a question as we look at the fund balance that we have available, as we look at spending money from the American Recovery Act. There may be opportunities there as well. We work with the federal government, and Autumn is going to be taking over as interim finance director starting next week. And maybe she can just comment about the discussions that our finance staff has had with their colleagues around the state about the spending. And there's just still a lot of unanswered questions. I mean, it's $11 million that we have. That's a significant amount of money. We're still not 100% clear what spending is allowable, what kind of reporting would be required. And so we're still sorting through that. Autumn, do you want to add anything?
That's exactly it. And we also, this is a significant amount of money for our community. And so we've started some engagement with the community, specifically around with nonprofits and businesses about needs. But we also need to do a lot of engagement with our community too about how this money should be spent. And so it's not only in assessing need in our community, and then also ensuring that we meet all the regulatory just hoops that need to happen, that we need to go through to get those funds allocated properly. So it'll be a challenge, but one that we need a bit more time on, but also again focused on community engagement too.
Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess
mostly
so,
answers your question.
The question was more oriented towards the acquisitions along the creek in the valley floor, the green Issaquah necklace kind of thing. I'm just thinking, what's your strategy in the budget? Like, where would you like to make the most investments for the land acquisition there?
Well, I mean, one of the challenges is what's available on the market at any given time. And so one of the discussions we've had with the council, and I think we'll continue to have with the council, is how much money do we want to have liquid and available should a parcel along the creek or in any other designated area come on the market? Because with property values being what they are, we're likely not going to find a property owner who is going to either make a donation or be interested in some sort of long, drawn-out negotiations. I mean, most property that goes on the market, I would think residential or commercial in Issaquah over the last year has been selling very quickly, has been selling over asking price, and there aren't very many mechanisms in government that allow us to be that nimble. And so I think one of the challenges is how can we have money available, how can we have direction from the council such that we could actively engage in a purchase transaction. That's a real challenge for us. And I think so one piece is having that money allocated. The other piece is trying to have the council be real specific. And I think up until now, the council's discussions have been, there's lots of land out there, and there's been a reluctance, and I think rightfully so, to identify parcels, because as soon as we go around saying we want to buy this parcel, this parcel, this parcel, the price of the parcel goes from X to X plus many dollars. So that's part of the challenge too. So I think really the first step is having resources allocated and available and liquid, and then hopefully putting in some processes so if a property does come on the market, we have a quiet list of properties right now that I think that we try to keep an eye on, and I have regular discussions with Jeff Watling, our Parks and Community Services Director. If a property were to come on the market, that we could quickly move. I think right now our biggest challenge would be, do we have the cash for the transaction? So appreciate the question. It's something we need to continue to work on. And again, we'll share with the council that this is certainly a topic of discussion that we heard this evening.
Especially when it comes to Creekside land acquisition, it takes time. And so I'm thankful that we have that vision of the Green Necklace and of preserving Creekside areas around Issaquah Creek. I'm still amazed how long the process took for us to build Confluence Park, and how many years, and that vision of, as properties became available, of the city acquiring those through grants and creative funding to build what is today Confluence Park. But that took decades. And so, you know, it's a long-term plan, but one that the city will continue to make progress in as opportunities come available.
Okay. Another topic that seemed interesting to me, I mean, it seems far-fetched, but what are the current resources like for broadband of any kind?
Well, again, another great question. I think there's lots of issues associated with broadband. There are, you know, what is the service being provided by the current commercial providers? And the city council, I think, is concerned that the commercial providers in Issaquah could do a better job of providing broadband. My guess is that there will be a discussion. As you know, Julian, there was a discussion the other evening at the council's special meeting on the strategic plan. I would imagine we will see some resources in the budget to begin a survey of residents to get a better handle on what are the deficiencies with the private carriers. On the public side, if the city were to say, let's get into the broadband business ourselves, that gets more complicated. While we have some conduit that we might be able to make available, it certainly does not exist citywide. We don't have existing fiber that's accessible for residential use. A lot of communities that have gone down the municipal broadband route have started with electric utilities. And when you have a municipal electric utility, there's already fiber in place to support that, and poles and right-of-way and conduit. More recently, as communities have tried to get into the broadband business, they usually have to do it in very small chunks, just because of cost and right-of-way acquisition, things like that. So I would imagine the first thing you'll hear from the city through the budget process and into next year is what can we do to better assess the current condition of the private networks, and then work with those companies. And if that's unsuccessful, then I would imagine we would go to the next step, which is to talk more broadly about public networks.
I would definitely appreciate some form of study or some sort placed in the budget to see what kinds of resources people have in their own homes in terms of internet access and internet speed. I think that'd be really useful, even if the idea of broadband is far-fetched. It would be just useful to take a look at.
Great, thank you.
If I might ask,
yeah,
if I might ask a question, and it may not be budget related, but it's been something that has puzzled me, and I'm sure most of my neighbors, and it's along the line of internet and cable. It seems like we have a cable commission, but I don't know what they do. And I guess I don't know who owns the hardware, you know, the cables that run through the city. You know, it seems like we have a choice of Comcast for the cable and the telephone company for the phone if you want a DSL. I don't think satellite is feasible. So you really have a choice of two providers. And just based on social media and what I read on Nextdoor, I can't imagine too many people in Issaquah are happy with either of those companies. Could you educate me on what role the city plays in terms of policing the telecoms?
Sure. So we kind of have to go back in time to a simpler age before there was the internet. Before there was the internet, there was cable television and there were telephone companies. Telephone companies throughout the country, and I think it's every state, but certainly most states are regulated by the state. And so local government, from the beginning of, the telephones was started 120 years ago, 110 years ago, as those networks were built out, individual states were responsible for any use of the right-of-ways. In some states, there still are fees paid for use of right-of-ways. In many states, there are not. And so as we sit here in 2021, the traditional telephone company and its infrastructure, there is no regulation whatsoever by the city. Cable TV started in different communities, different times, in the 1970s, 1980s. And in order for those companies to build their infrastructure, they needed agreements from cities to use the right-of-way, either attach to poles, go underground. And so the Congress empowered cities to have franchise agreements with those cable television companies for a percentage of the revenue in exchange for the use of the right-of-ways. That worked well for 30 years until the internet came along and cable companies realized that they could use their existing networks with the coaxial cable coming to the home to offer internet access. And so that became a boon for, I think, every cable company, including Comcast, the incumbent carrier here. And the federal government decided in its wisdom to exclude cities' abilities to regulate the use of the cable infrastructure for the internet. So the city still has the ability and the requirement to have a franchise with the cable company to provide cable television services, but we have really no say on the other uses of that network for the internet. So the cable system here is owned by Comcast. It is in the right-of-way. The city continues to receive a franchise fee. Those dollars are only calculated by the money that the cable company makes on providing cable television. So if they get telephone service, internet service, those monies we have no access to through a franchise fee, and that's federal law. CenturyLink, now known as Lumen, has a portion of the community that it has overbuilt, which means that they have infrastructure in place in some parts of Issaquah that provides service. And then Issaquah Highlands, when they were built, they created their own internet cable television utility, so they're there. So depending on where you live, most everyone has Comcast. Some would have Comcast and Highlands service. Some would have CenturyLink. There probably are a handful of folks that have all three, and then the telephone company to the extent that they offer that. So our ability to influence service improvements really is just the bully pulpit that we have. There's really nothing contractually that we can do to get service. We can shame them. We did that a little bit through the pandemic with some success, and Comcast did make some improvements about a year ago in some neighborhoods of Issaquah to improve service, but there was nothing contractually, no law or regulation that we had. It was really just the bully pulpit of a mayor and a city council saying this is horrible, you need to fix it. Yeah. Hope that answers the question, Ken. That's a long answer. But.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of good information. I hadn't realized that. So it's not like you could say, Comcast, you don't have the franchise anymore. I'm going to move it to another company and they get to use all of the cables and all the infrastructure. They own all of that. They just have to use the city right away. And in return, they pay some usage fee or some rental fee for the right of way. Is that kind of how it works?
And that's exactly how it worked before the internet. And now, they continue to use the right of way to make more money. But under federal law, we only have the ability to receive the franchise fee on the cable television service. So they're making lots more money running internet service, but that we don't see a percentage of that income under federal law.
All right, thank you. I guess I'm not going to hold any hope that Comcast or CenturyLink are going to get any better because of any pressure that the city can put on them.
Yeah, I mean, they are still a business. I think that there are some options. I mean, I think satellite is an option for some residents. It's probably more expensive, and not every situation would have that. The option that's going to become very attractive here for many residents is going to be wireless. T-Mobile, Verizon are all moving forward with home-based 5G, where you can have a modem that would connect wirelessly and have speeds that would be what you'd have at home now or even faster. And so as that is rolled out, and we hear from T-Mobile, especially Verizon, interested in doing that, that will require to be truly effective, lots more antennas. And so that then raises a whole other public policy question. Is the community ready to see little antennas on every light pole and street light in the community? Because it would take many of those connections to provide that kind of service. We haven't seen that yet to a great extent here, but we might. And then there's the question: will people be comfortable with that from aesthetic purpose, from a technology standpoint? And so, but that's on the horizon and is happening now in some communities around the country.
Thank you for that. So that might be another competitor that might cause them to be a little bit more customer oriented. So
potentially,
yeah.
Because then people being very mobile, if you had a phone that had that kind of connectivity and you were able to put that phone in a device as you walked in the door every night, and then had that kind of connection in your home, I think that's what they're shooting for. And so the question just is, how long will it take for them to build out the infrastructure? We happen to have a large national wireless company located, about 4 miles from where I'm sitting right now. So, they're certainly interested. I think it's just a matter of how that all plays out here.
Yeah, thank you.
Ken, are you hearing a lot of issues in Taos lately?
No, but I think people are just resigned that the cable companies are expensive. I mean, just basic cable anymore is cable and internet is almost $200, and when you start adding onto it, that gets even pricier. But Taos is an affluent community, and I think people are just resigned. That's just what it costs. In terms of the service, I think it's fairly robust, but the cable prices just keep on going up and up and up.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
It's 6:59. We had planned to be done in an hour. If there's a final question anyone has, that'd be great. Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap it up.
As a follow-up to Ken's questions, how much percent of the budget is the cable TV franchise, or how much was it in 2021?
I know that our budget manager, Susie Monsell, is on the line lurking quietly in the background. I don't know if Autumn has the ability to put her on, and if she has a document handy with that number.
I have a feeling she's looking it up. She just sent me a message saying it's very, very, very small amount.
It's very small? Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I need to know. Yeah.
Okay.
And if we linger for a moment or two more, we might get the number. So
no pressure. I can always follow up too with the actual number once we look it up.
All right. Anything else, Lisa? Any other final questions or thoughts?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much for hearing my pitch for the bathroom.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. Again, the mayor's budget will be coming out at the end of September. We'll do another one of these meetings shortly after the budget is presented, and walk through that and have an opportunity for questions and comments. The council will have a formal public hearing on the budget during the month of October. Plus, we'll take public comment at each of the meetings and discussions of the budget through the month of October and November. Again, my apologies for the bad connection. Thank you, Autumn Monahan, the assistant to the City Administrator and soon-to-be Interim Finance Director, thank you for your help this evening as well. Take care, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Good evening.
Bye.
Thank you.